no introduction, actually. I think everybody knows Dr. Olaokun Soyinka. It's a pleasure to have you and to do this with you. I've been looking forward to it for a while, and thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thanks
Yeah.
for the invite.
So I guess we can't help but talk about your experience with the Nadeko movement and the pro-democracy struggle, particularly during the Babangida Abacha, yes, the post-June 12. So my first question out of sheer curiosity is that why did you join that particular struggle? And by all social measures, you had a very comfortable life as a medical doctor. So why did you become a political activist? Is it genetic? Is it passion? Is it?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a bit of everything. I think every good activist is driven by at least an element of anger, frustration. I have been in the UK for a while and I had been procrastinating about coming back to Nigeria. I wanted to come back and get involved in nation building. I felt I was working as a medical doctor and yeah, I was comfortable and even began to get a little bit too settled. So I was thinking, okay, I must come back to Nigeria, I must come back to Nigeria, I must come back to Nigeria. And I thought a good time to come would be when democracy came back. And I even came out, had a great holiday, got a little bit involved in the excitement around the whole Hope Abiola campaign and all that. Went back to England to tidy up my affairs and see how I could come over and get into a new stage of life. I managed to not end up being married, so I also wanted to come back and, hopefully meet somebody I would get married to. And then they announced the election. So that was the first thing. My anger was rather personal. That, see, I've made all these plans, I want to come home, and now you just turned into military rule. So I said, okay, carried on with life there, and met up with my dad one day. I said, look, that I psyched myself up to be, have the next stage of my career in Nigeria, and now we're kind of stuck abroad, but I want to get involved. So he said, oh, okay, well, good job you mentioned that, because he didn't pressure us or anything. He was obviously, always very outspoken and carried on with his approach, which also informed me, but I wasn't involved. So I said, look, what's the best way to get involved? So, there's some groups around and all that. Anyway, he introduced me to Kayode Fayemi at that point. He knew at that point I was moving into medical publishing as well. I started a journal, and Fayemi was publishing the New Nigerian, it was involved in the New Nigeria Forum, and they published this newsletter, quite an intellectual newsletter, but basically about the Nigerian goings on in Nigeria and the Nigerian pro-democracy movement, and it was circulated abroad. And so I teamed up with him and started assisting with the publishing and writing for that Nigeria Now, it was called, the newsletter. And from there, once you enter, it was a whole movement. You very rapidly started going to meetings, meeting people, and then my dad started up the Nalicon, and I became involved in that. But anyway, all the movements, all the groups would always, come together around different issues, demonstrating about the atrocities that were going on, and lobbying, advocacy to the international community, and what have you. The most interesting and exciting part was later on in the struggle when we started Radio Kudirat. It actually started out of my publishing office, had an office in London, so we partly put some of that towards organizing, doing the planning, doing the fundraising, and then setting up the actual radio. The actual radio, it was the organization that was running from my office. The actual radio station itself wasn't even in England, but in the run-up to finding the people, getting them out of, some of them are in Nigeria, getting them out of Nigeria, raising funds, having the, making the applications, all those kind of things. That was started from, run from my office. So, yeah, I was neck deep in it, and it gave me a sense of purpose, and it gave me that frustration of not being able to come home. At least I was working with Nigerians, talking about Nigeria, planning for Nigeria's future, and yeah, so that's how I started.
So the reason why I led with that and was that, so now, I mean, here we are some odd 25 years after we got democracy, and you hear some things from certain people who were part of the struggle in one capacity or the other, expressing what seemed like buyer's remorse, in a sense that this was democracy we fought for, struggled under particularly the brutal dictatorship of Abacha, where there were political assassinations left, right, and center. And today, Nigeria seems to be slipping into some form of autocracy. The newest flavor, I would say now, is things around free speech, where you criticize the government. We've had some very odd things like the Cybercrime Act, where you could be arrested and jailed and even left to rot in prison if you don't have the connections or the representations for tweeting, for saying things on social media. So, and of course, if we talk about the workings and the dynamics of the democracy itself, our elections 25 years after are still largely problematic. There's still wanton corruption by the political class. So how do you feel 25 years after 1999, which was symbolic in this era of history of Nigeria? How do you feel about Nigeria's democracy in its current state?
How long have we got? That's a very... well, let me first start with on an optimistic note and say that one milestone that meant a lot to me symbolically was a few years ago when, I can't remember the exact year, but when we had 29 years in total at the time you had all the periods of military rule. So I think it was maybe 5 years ago or something that we reached the point where we have now had more years as a democracy than we had under the military. That was a fantastic achievement. In my mind, I'm seeing what we went through and what other countries, including civil war, and what other countries have gone through who haven't had much taste of democracy. I secretly hope that meant that the specter of autocratic rule had kind of, well, military rule at least, had disappeared. And I've also watched, because it also meant that that marked the time that, just coincidentally, that the younger generation was becoming mature adults who had never experienced military rule. So that's also a dangerous point, because you did begin to see occasionally in social media and occasionally in the papers, just here and there, for me it's an anathema, but people actually, like, not buyer's remorse, but looking back with some kind of almost fondness, or at least lamenting they see the corruption as a lack of discipline. They see the military as a disciplined alternative, yeah. And therefore make the incredibly simplistic, 2 + 2 = 5. Therefore, the military should come back and they will be the solution. No, it just means they'll be more disciplined about corruption, and not only that, you have less ability to even open your mouth about it. Corruption and misgovernance, and they did both. What on earth? I mean, think about it. You're looking for somebody to come and run a complicated country, and it's soldier. And don't mean a disrespect. There are many soldiers that are intellectual and are very capable administrators and very enlightened, But the point is, their training, their profession is not aimed at running a country. Their profession is all about military strategy, discipline in the sense of running warfare and battles, and they're just qualified for something different. So what on earth, why do we turn to the military as if they have any kind of wherewithal except guns? And experience should tell us that wanting the military back is really, really, really asking for proper buyer's remorse. So I stress this, and I'll answer your question more directly, but I stress this point because whatever remorse we feel about our democracy, at least we're in a position to open our mouths, agitate for change, or even try and make the change. And that is not an avenue available to us under autocratic rule. In fact, it's the reverse. They know what can lead to them having to depart. That is freedom of speech, freedom of vote, freedom of association, and the other freedoms that come with organizing for change. They know what leads to it. So they don't just repress those results of those things, groups that form or individuals that speak out. They start attacking the basis, making sure you do not emerge. So the damaging effect of autocratic rule on society is much deeper than just, I can't vote, they're a bit strict. Oh, no. You begin a very insidious destruction of human freedoms and all the things that we hold dear. So nobody should ever, with their bias, start calling for any kind of autocratic rule. It is a worrying sign when you see autocracy emerging, or autocratic tendencies emerging in a democracy, and it always makes me cringe, especially when I see people who are in the struggle. They know what it means to arrest people on trumped up, rather flimsy excuses, to take people in front of the courts, abusing existing statutes or stretching statutes to breaking point, because we've seen it under the military. They take any old statute and causing public unrest, or behavior likely to cause this or that. It gives me the shivers even thinking about it. I mean, it's a matter of life and death, so I don't want people to forget this. So, autocratic tendencies in a democracy, at least we are still free to point them out, to spot them. It does worry me seeing it, and I do think the sad thing is watching how quickly we fall in line. Even that is one of the rather insidious effects of having spent many decades under military rule. We kind of become automatic, we become too keen to obey. People say, oh, don't rock the boat. Oh, you're a troublemaker, don't talk. No, I'd like to see people getting up and standing up, using their freedom of speech, and making a noise when we see all these undesirable tendencies. I think that our response needs to be mature, it needs to be well thought through. One of the areas we are not advancing is, I think, public discourse. I think just as we were beginning to get the idea of how you run a marketplace of ideas, where somebody who disagrees with you is not your enemy, they both love the country, you want to suggest how we move forward. But the social media tendency that, you're against me, you're an enemy, and all that, is spilling back over into society, and back to your original point, that we're slowly seeing people wanting to curb speech here and curb speech online. And the responsibility should be on us, I must say. I used to be fully for free speech absolutist. But then I began to realize that in the era of information, free speech is more powerful than it used to be. So the same way we have laws against violence, I see free speech now being used to bring violence. And by bringing violence, I don't mean just calling for somebody to be beaten up. I mean saying something that you know is going to disrupt somebody's life. What's that violence? Accusing people of things they didn't do, making sure they get arrested and go through hell before they are finally discovered to be innocent, libeling people online. This recent controversy with the lawyer who slandered or libeled his professional colleague. I like where he's coming from. We need people to speak up, but don't do it carelessly. don't give the opposition a gift by falling foul of some kind of law. And I think it's because we have this habit online now where anything goes. Even truth doesn't really matter anymore. Truth is relative. So it's a bit of a long-winded and rambling answer, but I think to summarize what I'm trying to say is, one, let's never wish for any form of autocracy. Two, let's speak out when we do get it, and let's try and, in a democracy, autocratic tendencies will come out. Let's squash them, let's speak up against them. But three, let's focus on truth, let's focus on responsible dialogue. Let's not just try and shout anything to tarnish somebody and tell a lie just to make a point. Truth pays us all. And I see worrying tendencies for people say we're in a post-truth society, and I used to wonder how truth is true. How can what does that mean? But we see it now that people build alternative realities and build a narrative and then get people riled up around that false narrative. And we should watch what's going on in other countries and try not to go down that route. And I fear very much that we have almost gone down the American route. I mean, we built our system on the American system, but they at least got their act together and became one of the greatest countries or economies in the world. We haven't had that yet. Yet we want to rush headlong into making the mistakes they make with massive societal inequities, careless talk, being more post-truth than post-truth society should be, and so on. So I'm worried for our democracy. And one of the reasons I'm worried for our democracy is that we too have been captured by the rich. They steal our money. They use our money to entrench themselves. Having entrenched themselves, they bought the politicians or went into politics. So they, being those who have looted our coffers. And we are now getting to a point where the state has been captured. So that's another reason why we must speak up and speak up loudly. Because if they get completely solidly entrenched, then there's no way out. The money will rule the country.
I mean, one important point, factoid, I would say you mentioned in your answer, which is that now we've now spent more years under civil rule than military rule. I wonder, what's like your quick reaction to the fact that, at least in this dispensation, 25 years, we spent more years under presidents who are former military leaders than not. Do you think that has, because a lot of people will tell you that we are living still in a militarized democracy. The former soldiers, the retired generals, they still have a lot of influence. A lot of what was stolen has been reinvested into politics and buying political connection. And we've constructed this clientelist political economy, so to speak. And so, like, what's your reaction to the fact that a lot of people will even criticize the Constitution on this basis, that this was a Constitution that the military basically handed to us. It wasn't by consensus, and some of its fault lines because it is ill-fitted for the society with which we are using it. So what's your reaction to the ongoing influence of the military in civil and political life?
Yeah, it's a very good thing you pointed that out, because that thing bugged me. As I go back to a democratic rule, I guess a former soldier who has even ruled, not just even a former soldier who has ruled Nigeria before. It's like, why are we recycling the old? Where is the new blood? And it's time for the younger generation to take over. And here we are just recycling the elderly and those who have already been there and not particularly acquitted themselves well. So I calmed myself down by telling myself that, okay, well, it's transitional. Let's be happy. And this is democratic. At least they have to face an election. But you could see the tendencies. You could see the militaristic tendencies in Obasanjo and clearly in Buhari. And you could see that impatience with dissent, that one of my favorite phrases that somebody, I can't remember who said it, but he said, when you confuse power with knowledge. An important thing about democracy is it's accepted that no one person has all the answer. When you have autocracy, it gradually becomes that person at the top becomes, has the attitude of l'État, c'est moi, I am the state is me. And everything they say is automatically right because they are the one in power. And you can see that change happen in leaders if you watch when people are new to power, and then you can watch their evolution. Initially, they speak with caution, and they may be acknowledge others, and gradually they become comfortable and realize that nobody really says no or disagree, and then they become all knowing in their own eyes. So my feeling is that although having those ex-military running Nigeria was a kind of transition, it has had the unfortunate effect of us feeling that only certain people, a certain age and a certain experience should be in charge of this country. And I think it stifled the emergence of a genuine political class, and it's also perpetuated that sense that they feel that they are still really dictators, they're impatient with dissent, and we obey in advance. We cower to them even before they've asked us to bend down. So I think society does need to become more, civil society needs to become more organized. We need to be very alert to these emerging tendencies. And I think I find it injustice upon injustice that it's not just the military, like you rightly pointed out, it's also the kleptocracy. The fact that certain people cornered, all these people get oil blocks and become stupendously rich. And then even if they don't go into politics themselves, many are so egotistical, they go into politics just because they've now got the money and they feel they should be backing their orders. But there's also this godfatherism. Many have quietly gone to the background but are stupendously influential just because they're throwing money around behind the scenes. A lot of the time we don't realize just quite how much, you hit the nail on the head, those people are behind the scenes and they have this country in a grip that is going to be very difficult to remove. And again, this is what I mean by what is generally meant by state capture. When these people have amassed so much money that they can buy anything, including buying your democracy for you. And we know that democracy votes are easily bought in this country. But the vote buying happens, the damage to democracy, or the destabilizing of democracy happens way before we get to the ballot.
Oh yeah, way before we get to the ballot. I mean, voters only get a paltry change as we see.
Yeah. It's more like go and vote. Are you happy now? You vote. Go and sit.
The real money is when you buy the entire electoral process, including ballot counting, including the election umpire, including presidential electoral commissioners, and. So that's an interesting point, but. Before we go into money in politics, which is also something I want to talk about, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about power. You've been in public service, you've been very close to power, and how it works in Nigeria, it sometimes fascinates me. Perhaps maybe that's not exclusive to Nigeria. So you have this dynamic where even if autocracy sort of transmits by individuals who are close to power or close to the organ at the top, who then by extension arrogate such powers to themselves, and then they feel it gives them the freedom and sometimes the impunity to then act as they wish. Like right here now on this show, someone might feel sufficiently annoyed to come and arrest me for insulting the president. And the president may not be aware of such actions, or may not be interested in such actions, could not even have approved such actions. So you have situations like that. You have there were the media was awash with reports of people in even the first lady's office picking people up, beating them, locking them up for sometimes months, and these are, individual. You have special assistants who act that way. You have special advisors who also do certain things. In some cases, security aides, arrogate powers to themselves to then act, which the effect, like you said, it has on us is you don't know who is who, you don't know who you offend, and then you subconsciously fall in line. So in your experience in public service, how does the psychology of this phenomena work?
Yeah, it's it's a fascinating area, and it's one of the areas that people comment on a lot when they talk about how people they know were before and after they got some kind of power, maybe in politics. I just to show you how intrigued I am by it, I was halfway through my tenure as commissioner. I was asked to come and talk about whatever I wanted, but basically my experience in government. So I decided to do a tongue-in-cheek presentation on how to know if you become, because I always consider myself not a politician. When people say a politician, I say, well, even my governor used to call me, he used to divide the cabinet into two, the politicians and the technocrats. And I was firmly always in the technocrat side. He used to say, even when they used to give us little bonuses for going back to our home local governments, the politicians will always get more money because they had more expenses because they knew how to do politics. So us technocrats, we just go there and talk grammar, so we didn't really need to be given anything that we would spend because we didn't know how to spend politically. So I gave a speech on how to know when you are becoming a politician, and basically I developed a checklist, and you just mark yourself out of a number of things that say whether you're becoming a politician. So it was things like whether you can still drive your own car, whether you carry your own bags, whether when you're going in a photograph, you automatically find to be in the center, and how many agbadas you own, and those sorts of things. And they were joking and they were tongue-in-cheek, but they were based on those little things that show that you're beginning to make the change. I had an uncle of mine who is one of my role models, Professor Olaokun Soyinka. I always used to be fascinated by people who were what I had assumed. I'm talking about when I was young. So you're still working on how life works. I know there's big people and there's less big people. As a kid, you just see how people behave around. And I knew my uncle was a big man, but he didn't behave like one. He would sit in the front of his car with his driver. He would often even walk to these places. He would go and want to go to the local provision shop. He would not send someone, he would just stand up and he would walk down there himself and buy it and all that. I just saw how he remained resolutely himself, no matter what position he was in. I knew him when he was a senior doctor, I knew him when he was a minister, and he did not change at all. So I think it's partly due to maybe it is genetic or something. I think people are just born with a feeling that they are how they are and they like how they are. And everything else, they can see how superficial these trappings are. That power can come in an instant and go in an instant. You can be somebody and can be nobody the next minute. But there are others where it's almost as an identity, either from arrogance or feeling, yes, I should always have been here. Finally, I'm here, and now they know I'm the business. And the others who see it like an item of clothing, and you wear it for a while, and you discard it. Unfortunately, too many of the people who become our politicians, they fought their way there, competed bitterly, because they know what they want to get there. They want power and they want money. And when they get there, they exercise the power and they excise the money from the treasury. And I think one of the most important things we can do is to educate our kids from a very young age to understand that the public service, you are going there to do what you can to move Nigeria forward. And I don't know what is could be one aspect of the power. I mean, when I say power, I'm always talking about power and money. They go together. People want power so they can get money. People want money so they can get power ad infinitum. And I remember having a discussion with a senior diplomat. I can't remember. He just told me that because it was during the Abacha time. He was talking on that, and I asked him. I said, "Well, this amount I'm reading, and of course, they what gets stolen today. You know, we always do better in our. There's one area in which we advance relentlessly. We're always stealing more than the previous regime. The amounts that are quoted, they just become unbelievable. But even then, in the 90s, I was asking that, when doesn't it become a point when it's enough? If you ask any of us to write down your top 10 wishes that you could do, like they say, the bucket list of things you want to do before you die, I'm sure if anybody right now who's not in power wrote down 10 things, I'm sure with $1 billion they can cover it. Maybe even less than $1 billion. They could cover all those, travel to this place, buying this, own a Ferrari, have a house, have a swimming pool, and all that. Whatever it is, I'm sure $1 billion will let you to achieve all those things and then have change which you can invest and live in comfort for the rest of your life. So he told me that he felt it was a mental illness, that these people were actually diagnosable. And when you go to a certain point where you're just stealing so much that it doesn't even make sense. And I had unfortunately come to agree with him. At that time, I was, a young doctor. So I just laughed and I just, that's a mental illness. It's greed and all that. But I still didn't understand how people can go to such extremes. So for me, I don't have an answer, but I do know that if we don't change, if we allow those who are greedy for power, greedy for money, to fight and occupy that territory, then we will always be lamenting from the sidelines. I'm saying this as someone who went into politics and came back out. And inside me, I feel that maybe I should have. That's why I actually don't talk much publicly, because I think I should do my talking from a position of either doing, or if I'm not going to do, then I'll face my profession and do that. But in the back of my mind, I think, man, if we don't occupy this space and we leave the greedy and the power hungry to occupy that space, then they will occupy Nigeria for us.
So, what then makes this? I mean, inevitably, we arrive at the money point, which money and politics. What makes it stick? What makes it so? I mean, we can say mental illness, but sometimes we are talking about a number of people that almost makes it statistically improbable that they are all suffering from the same mental illness at the same time. So I tend to always look at the incentives and what makes it stick. Why are the incentives so difficult to change? Is it the case of the fox and the hen house, which is the people who are the most beneficiary of this dynamic are also the people who we have entrusted with changing them? Or is it because we as a people ourselves, civil society, we've become too docile and we are not, pushing the right levers? I mean, you talked about your uncle. How he lived is actually par for course in some countries as a leader. I mean, you see videos online of people running into the Dutch Prime Minister when they are going to work. The British Prime Minister flies commercial, for example. There are some spendings you do as a politician in certain countries where it will automatically trigger an investigation of your finances. That, okay, how did you, how were you able to afford this or buy this car or spend this on holiday, right? So, and I don't want to believe that there are intrinsic genetic differences between Nigerians and Dutch people, for example. So have we become complacent as citizens, or are politicians become too powerful to make the status quo remain as it is?
I think it's a difficult one, but let me tell you how I analyze it. When I was in the pro-democracy movement, in London, I was mixing with all types, and we all knew what we wanted, which was to drive these people out who are ruining our country. When we got back, I didn't come back immediately in 99, it was like a year or so, extricating myself. But when I got back, we could see all the old, partners who had been carrying placards outside the Nigerian embassy in London, joining you to travel to pro-democracy meetings and writing articles, etc. And they had all gone in different directions. Some went back, academics, they went back to academia. But others stayed in the fray and got into politics. And many of them became the people who were fighting against, just no longer in military garb, but otherwise they were politicians, not doing what they were sent to do and busy enriching themselves. I was disappointed, but I realized that, look, I never really stopped to ask, why are you in this fight? We knew what we were fighting for, but we didn't really know what our motives were. Some people want to dislodge those people so they can get there and do their own. So just like I said before, a lot of people fighting to get into those positions, they're competing, and you think they're competing because you are saying, I don't like theft. Get out, you've disqualified yourself. They are there saying, you've disqualified yourself, get out. But deep down, they do like theft, at least if it's for them. So I think what has happened, to answer your question directly, is yes, they have captured that space. But the problem is that the citizens fighting them are just fighting them because they don't have. So many people who could make more of a difference are not really fighting the things they should be fighting against, because they don't really want the system to change. They just want to get there and then benefit from the system. Now, the other thing, my final point on this, is that right now is the vast majority who don't really want to change it. And I divide those into two. Those who deliberately want to keep the status quo, and those who kind of didn't realize but end up enabling that. In other words, worst case, they're just not shaking the boat. Why? Because part of the strategies is the co-opting. When I got into government, I found that certain meetings kind of made me feel a bit queasy or uncomfortable, and I just sort of faded away. Or at least I thought I faded away. What actually happened was my behavior was noted, and I was sidelined. In other words, you very carefully make sure that you are reeled in, and if you are not reeled in, they are very quickly put aside. Now, what it means is that they always maintain control, and they're always in a comfortable environment where the supposedly unsayable can be said. There are code words for everything, or euphemisms for making bad things sound better. And so nobody's there working to change from the inside. Meanwhile, those of us on the outside, we can't affect it. We're not there when decisions are taken, even if you are in the minority. So how do you change a system like that? If you're on the outside, you're just shouting. If you have been shouting and you get on the inside, half of you join them, and half of you are co-opted. So you can't make a change. So all of that being said, I think literally only solution is one, those of us on the sidelines keep shouting but keep fighting to get in. But somehow, and this I don't know how, is you have to identify the genuine ones who are shouting with the right motives. Some people are shouting just because they want to be there to do the same. Others are shouting because, on matter of principle, they don't want this to happen because it's destroying our country. How we identify those people, I really don't know, because, man, some people who spoke the best, who are the most motivating, invigorating speakers, had turned out to be the most two-faced kleptomaniacs when they got into power. I won't name names, but some people in positions of power now, and I think, hey, you sit around the table listening to you slamming the military rule and complaining about the theft that was going on. They're not better when they get them. There's no magic to identifying those people, but we need to if we're going to make a change. I do think something in our educational system needs to change. That might help if you mold people from, there's a certain lack of shame that exists now. But I'm not so convinced about that. I look at I watch America. I watch America because I know we are supposed to be following behind in a similar system. And they are one of the most mature democracies in the world. And just with a flick of the finger, you put one foot at the top and then the whole system becomes corrupted. The speed with which the American system has become corrupted it's quite scary. It's quite scary. There were always corrupt people there, make no doubt about it, but it was controlled. And they had to bow to the system. The system, they had to work around the system. Now we've made those people in power have made the system bow to them. They control the system and designed it to pay. So I'm a bit pessimistic on that one.
So let's move to what I like to bundle together as human capital, which is health and education. Someone, I think during the last presidential media chat, someone made the obvious observation that we spend more on security now. Some will say for obvious reasons, justifiably or whatever. We spend more on security than health and education combined. And it's something that always frustrates me, something that makes me angry sometimes when I look at all the low-hanging fruits on health, particularly that we are not making progress fast enough. So drawing on your experience, both in WHO and as commissioner, what are the challenges of the health sector, if you could just name a few, and why, especially from the public policy side, why hasn't been any movement in the positive direction, so to speak?
Well, my early analysis of that was simply that the strongest voices in the health system unfortunately tended to be the most senior medics, but they were the most specialized. So, consultant surgery, consultant physician, these were the senior people who had the ears of the politicians. So naturally, they attracted money to big ticket items, big hospitals, equipment, buildings. And so we kind of lost sight of what healthcare is. Public health, which is more population oriented, tended to be not very sexy, if I could use that term. It's not exciting to people. It's all about stopping things happening as well. So it's not really easy to sell, It's I always say about public health that it's not very interesting to tell. The biggest claim you have to success in your job is that X or Y did not happen. You just can't get people excited to say, oh, so many thousand children would have died of measles but didn't, or would have had cholera but were protected. It's taken for granted. If you are doing your job well, nobody knows you are even doing your job. So that affected our health system. We've not pumped enough money into public health, enough money into primary health. That is healthcare that gets to the grassroots. We're all into big hospitals and somewhere where you have to travel to and spend a lot of money to get a fancy machine to diagnose. So curative again versus preventive. So all those things have pushed us to the wrong priorities. We're getting there now in terms of refocusing on primary healthcare, on how to get healthcare to the grassroots level with health insurance and things like that. But now it's too little too late because we don't have the budgets. Like we said, the budget is now all going to the military. So what little is left can't now solve the problem that exists. So definitely it's going to be something outside of government that turns our health system around. But government still has to try and provide the enabling environment.
I'll give one example that makes me angry right now. And I think you and I have talked about this before. Of course, there are two malaria vaccines currently out there with proven efficacy. Um, Nigeria is not poor enough to qualify for free vaccines from Gavi, right? Whereas a third of global malaria deaths still happen in Nigeria. And it still baffles me why we cannot allocate a portion of 2025 budget, even if it's just a health budget, to just achieving that one thing, which is that, okay, for 2025, we want to halve malaria deaths in Nigeria, even if that is just the only thing we manage to achieve. So it baffles me, like, yeah, public health is not sexy and all that, but there are some obvious travesties. And I know, is it that we don't value our people, or because some of these problems are very rural and not close to home, so they are less visible. So what is the problem? Why can't we just say this problem, let's tackle this problem? Yes, we are short of money, we can't do everything and this, but in 2025 health, we are doing this. Next year, let's see what else we can tackle. Why can't we have such an approach to healthcare policy-wise?
Well, let me, you're tempting me to be controversial here. So let me, I used to wonder why politicians would always campaign on healthcare. If you look at any campaign over any period of time, any politician, any state, they will always say my top 5 on my agenda. You can't see one without healthcare in number 1 or 2 position. Any campaign, everybody understands the importance of health. Then you now look at performance. In my experience, healthcare was second in my governor's priority, but we were somewhere near like 6th or 7th in terms of funds allocated during my tenure. I can't remember specifically, so I don't want to be quoted, but we were nowhere near. If you would have thought if we were second in the priority of campaign, at least we'd be up there in the attention that was paid. But all the things that tried to get funded, very few did get funded, and the ones that did were politically more visible. So if I were to go so I'm using this to explain why some things get funded and some things get don't. If you go to a politician who's thinking about an upcoming election and wants to think what's going to be most visible, what's going to be the most impact. When I say something is not sexy, it's not sexy politically. If you are going to go out there and campaign and say, I did this and I did that, you can point to a 4-story building, even though there's no beds in it yet, no healthcare workers there, but you've written Soyinka Memorial Hospital there, specialist hospital there. You say, you tell everybody it's coming, it's going to have 200 beds, etc. Versus, oh, yes, we distributed, all your kids will have had malaria vaccine by now. Hey, you haven't died longer. Now, you've done well if you did that. But guess who is going to get the votes? If you are standing up campaigning and saying, I'm going vaccine for me, vaccinated all your children, or vaccinated all your children, or I built this big building. Buildings and tangible things are exciting to campaign with politically, and the politicians realize this. So going back to what I was saying about, they will campaign on this, but what they will deliver will not be healthcare. It will be smoke and mirrors. They're boboing you. They did not deliver healthcare. They built some edifices and told you they're working on health. So it's more politically exciting. And going back to being controversial, I used to rack my brains and say, but even if that's the case, politicians realize if they put in healthcare up there, it means they realize it's a priority. So fine, why are they not, therefore, naturally drawn to perform more? Whether it's building, because even the buildings they build, like I said, they build the building, they won't put beds in there, they won't put the staff there. They don't care if it becomes a white elephant project. they actually don't care. So I said to myself, well, if people find health the most important, healthcare, I mean, if you have a problem with your health now, it becomes the most important thing to you, bar none. Until you are back on your feet, you couldn't care less about any other thing in your life if you're seriously ill. Politicians know this, individuals know it. So why do we have all these promises? Not only do they not deliver, they don't seem to pay the political price. So I ask myself, why do politicians campaign, fail to deliver, don't, they're not delivering, does not cost them politically? What is the missing link? Then one day just hit me. I say it's religion. But I'm not saying that in a negative way. Religion enables the population to cope. If your children do not have a school nearby, you are not going to mention anything to do with God. But if, God forbid, somebody close to you falls sick and their health or their life looks to be at risk, and you go and care is substandard, or even you can't get them into the hospital and the person sadly dies or suffers a permanent disability, next thing is on Sunday or Friday, go to the mosque or the church and beg God and say sorry and thank you for keeping them alive. Oh, you chose to take them. In other words, we cope with the disaster by turning to religion. Nobody sits there cursing the politician. It's God. So health is so important, it has transcended politicians. So politicians can promise the earth, completely fail to deliver, and when they fail, the people just turn to God. So I realize that that is a big part of what politicians have realized. I need to promise this to show that I care, but I don't need to deliver. Because when I fail to deliver, people will just say, it is God's will, or God did not favor us this time, or God did it. You know, maybe you have a good outcome in a very substandard hospital or whatever, but somehow you struggle, you're poorly treated, you get to a place where you finally get the problem solved, and you thank God. The politician is not mentioned in the whole period that you're going through this trauma. So I realized that they have realized, they have triggered, or they have understood this, politicians have understood this, they don't need to deliver. And bottom line is, to provide health care, you have to care. They don't care. I'm sorry to say this, if they cared, our health system would be in a different state. You want to tell me they don't know that a building cannot provide health care? You don't need to have gone abroad to know that a building will not provide it. It's people that provide health care. Therefore, if anybody wants to revolutionize the healthcare system, what are you going to start with? People. It's simple. If I want to revolutionize healthcare in this country, I'll just take a massive budget. I will just train until the country is awash with healthcare professionals. I don't need to do anything. They will organize themselves. They will provide healthcare. Those who will go abroad will go abroad. Who will have enough to stay here and provide healthcare. But if those people are not here, I can build buildings until we run out of cement. Healthcare will not be provided. I can buy machines. Healthcare will not be provided. It's people. But bottom line is, I'm afraid, until they actually start caring, we won't see a change. But on a positive note, like I said, we are beginning to see public health, especially after COVID. People began to realize the importance of public health and all that. So it's going in the right direction. But sadly, too little, too late. So private sector is going to have to play a role. But the problem there is the private sector is profit driven. That also does not sit well with healthcare. You only need to look at the American system again. I use America a lot, so that's nice. As a guide to what not to do, what traps not to fall into.
Yeah, I'll challenge you a bit on that one. But to buttress your point on religion, I recall there was this study in Ghana a couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago, where a small village was given health insurance, where they can access medical care cheaply. And the results that came in was that church attendance in that particular village fell by close to 60%. It created controversy. People stopped paying offering, and because now they have a hospital where they can. Fascinating relationship between our societies and religion, something also I'll get to. So, but the quality of care, what do you think has gone wrong? Is it, again, going back to the lack of investment question? or is it a case of now the best schools you can even go to for medical education are private schools? Public schools are more or less, I mean, whatever is left of them, anyways. Where the quality of care has sort of gotten to a point where sometimes you go to hospitals and you are genuinely alarmed by the standard of practice, by even by so-called specialists. And I bring up this point because it feeds into the religion question. Because you hear cases or even see cases of people where they said, oh, we were in the hospital for months, they couldn't do anything. Nobody could give us an accurate diagnosis of what was even wrong. We spent years in treatment for so and so, and there was no positive result. So the investment question, is it also downstream what has affected the quality of healthcare that the population gets?
Yeah, healthcare is quite unique. I'll give you an idea that will make you realize one of the major problems we have. You see, you can't experiment. You shouldn't do experimentation or trial and error with humans. Or put it another way, neither you nor I want to go to a place where the person treating you is learning with you as the guinea pig.
Yeah.
Medical school teaches you the basics. Okay? Even though you spend 6 years there, you come out with very broad but very superficial knowledge. It's on the job that I learned more in my first 3 months as a qualified doctor in houseman, doing my housemanship, than I did in medical school, I would say. Maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but certainly in terms of useful practical knowledge, you can't beat learning on the job. But it was supervised learning. I was the most junior member in a team. I didn't make a move that was not supervised or approved. I came in, plugged into the system, and I had a whole of the system. I was the lowest piece of the jigsaw, so the lowest brick in the wall. And as I worked my way up, I learned non-stop, including having to do more book work and more exams, but you also on the job, you are being taught all the time. Now, that's a medical system that's working because it has enough people to plug into each single level. Okay. Here, because we have not enough healthcare professionals, all those brand new, completely untrained, inexperienced medical professionals who have just qualified, the system grabs them and says, oh, thank God, we've got a new crop of doctors. We have no doctor there, go. And we throw all our least experienced, newly trained professionals, whether it's doctor, whether it's nurse, or whether it's physio. They now go somewhere where they are the be all and end all. Okay, everybody comes and, doctor, even if they are not a doctor or they are not a nurse, so far you are there wearing a uniform, everybody is, you are their savior. You start off feeling you are thrown in the deep end. But what you realize is an interesting thing is that whatever you do somehow seems to be fine. Again, going back to what I was saying earlier, if you have a bad outcome, nobody blames you. It was going to happen. It was fate. So somebody comes in sick, dies. Who is there to tell you that you did? Certainly, our own defense system, for our own sanity, you cannot be there thinking, I caused this, I caused this. So you're going to build a wall against it being your fault, number one. Number two, there's nobody senior to you to tell you, this is what you did wrong, that's why they died. Or even, you couldn't have done anything, but if we had been in a bigger hospital, this is what they had, this is the treatment they would have needed, and they may have survived. Sadly, they came to the primary healthcare center where we did not have oxygen or blood to transfuse or whatever. You will learn from that. Then there are those who come in, you take a guess, give them something, they go away. Maybe they don't come back, they get better at home, or maybe they go to another hospital, they don't get better, they tried you, they will try somebody. Whatever happens, you don't learn from that. So in other words, you are not learning from superiors, and you are not learning from experience, because only experience shows you that whatever you do, either they don't come back, or they die, or they survive. If they survive, they thank you. You may even have treated them wrong and they survived despite your treatment. They'll come back and say thank you for doing the wrong thing. So you can see that picture of somebody being trained with all the theory and then entering a system that slowly gives them experience from all very well trained professional seniors that turn you into a fully baked item is absent here. So what you get is people who have fake confidence, or rather false confidence. It's genuine. They're genuinely confident because, hey, I was the only healthcare professional serving so many thousands of population. You become confident. What can't I handle? I've been there doing that. I was the only one doing it. I treated them and I didn't kill anybody, and I learned how to treat fevers and hemorrhages and this and that, and deliver babies and what have you. So in other words, our system is designed to turn partly trained, half-baked healthcare professionals into hopeless healthcare professionals with false confidence. So with full confidence, they come to bigger hospitals because that's their ambition. They move out to the system, and now they're malpracticing all over the place with full confidence. Meanwhile, the few seniors they now meet have their own malpractices they're doing. So they swap malpractices. So I think I've just designed you a system that is guaranteed to be suboptimal. Okay? Few doctors will come back from abroad, they may be trained in a good system. Not all systems abroad are good. But let's say they come back, they've been in a good system. How long can you last? And you see all that, maybe going to a public hospital and say, man, I can't go. What do? You set up your own hospital, then you start employing people. Back to square one again. It's those people running away from the village who come to your new specialist hospital say, oh yes, I was, you look at the CV, oh, the doctor in this the hospital, that hospital, oh, 3 years experience, oh, okay, I'll take you on. That is now your frontline person because you are the senior doctor. You don't see everybody. So I hope I painted a picture of a system that does not work, but cannot work and will not work unless there's fundamental change. And that change has to come not just from the training in the schools, but if you don't then staff your hospitals with qualified professionals who will now train the new ones before they are inflicted. In the UK, you can't just go and set up a hospital once you've qualified. You have to go through a period of training under your superiors. There's no way you can just say, oh, I passed, I have a certificate, I'm going to set up a hospital and start treating people. You'll be caught and either jailed or drummed out of the medical system. Here, we are so lacking in competence. Oh, great, a brand new doctor. Good, come. Let's use you here on your own. So that's, in a nutshell, why we have such a problem with quality.
So if, for example, today I, appoint you the healthcare Caesar, or some people say Czar, Americans, of Nigeria today. Not necessarily the health minister, maybe someone with, that has to deal with less political baggage, but the position of influence. How would you design, because you criticize the American system, how would you design a national health insurance system? Because you see some things about the way we do things in Nigeria that are very worrying. So, for example, maybe from experience and you have some change, you want to start an health insurance company in Nigeria. Let's say the capacity you have is to serve Ikoyi, Lekki, and closer places. But the health insurance law says you have to have an office in every state of the federation. In some cases, particularly in that particular example, you've built in an inefficiency because you then overstretch your capital to the point where, yes, you might, if I come to your office, I might get good health insurance in Lagos, but in Maiduguri, it's a completely different experience, right? One of my favorite one is the case of pharmacies, where some people manage to sneak in ridiculous monopoly practices like your pharmacy cannot be within 1,000 meters of another pharmacy. So these weird things that you see in the way we do things, where we sort of from the ground up we bake in inefficiencies. How would you design a national health insurance system that that works? Let's start with that.
Yeah, it's a highly complex area, and if I pretend I had the solutions, I would be lying. But I can certainly point out some what I think are guiding principles, and I don't think we're really following them. I mean, the issue of having an office in every state, and that's obviously vested interest. Must have pushed that in there. In other words, okay, this thing is going to open up a lucrative area to competition. How do we make sure the competition really struggles before they can dislodge us from our place of preeminence? So obviously, vested interests have shot that one in there because it really doesn't make sense to me either. Let me start from the position that I believe healthcare is a human right. Okay, I don't think anybody should suffer death or disability simply because they don't have money, at least for the basics. Okay, if you happen to be a billionaire and you can afford an air ambulance and you can buy everything to keep you alive in an highly unusual and extreme situation, fine, that's your luck. But I don't think it should be your bad luck that you have malaria and you can't afford either the consultation or the test or the drugs, and therefore you die. Or the child, you cannot find oxygen for your asthmatic child, and the child dies. I don't think anybody, especially in a country where most people who do have money probably may have got it in a questionable route. So corruption is now keeping paying for you to have better healthcare. So I think let's accept healthcare as a human right. Certain basics must be provided. As a public good, government has a bigger role to play. But people seem to want to say that, no, government can't do it alone, therefore push it to the private sector. What does the private sector do? It inserts itself as a middleman, for example, health insurance. Again, the American model shows us that insurance, we don't even need to look to the American model. It's the constant complaint of doctors in the system that are working with insurance. Okay? The insurance don't want to release the money. So if you have to have pre-approval, a lot of times they turn down something that they shouldn't be turning down. That means some bureaucrat is determining the treatment that you get. If I know you need this treatment, I try and get approval, and they say no, you can't have it. Why? Probably because in their experience that I don't often see that. Yeah, the reason you're saying is this person is in extremis, so they are in a worse condition than most. So they're needing something that most others don't need. You, as a bureaucrat, don't know that. Me, as a doctor, I know you need it. So I will be countermanded by a bureaucrat. But why is the bureaucrat doing that? To maximize profits. Is it justified? Well, if you are in their seat, guess what Nigerians do? You realize that the insurer that's paying not the patient. They start inventing things to pretend to or to treat you with so that they can sell more drugs. So we too have made a run for our own backs because, trust me, I've heard some horror stories from insurance companies where literally, like some hospitals in the farther reaches, and this is, by the way, an argument for having an office in every state because this insurance company did not have an office in that state, so they rarely went to go and do supervisory visits. So there was this hospital that was getting bigger and bigger and treating more and more people, and when they finally went to go and visit the place, it was like one person and a desk and a couple of rooms. The entire thing was fiction. They just been manufacturing patients and making claims and registering people who did not exist so that they could just be claiming money for things they weren't doing. So even if you are being, so I don't like the fact that insurers are middlemen and they're going to maximize their profits. I think it mitigates against healthcare for the masses. But at the same time, there's corruption and they have to safeguard their profits. Either way, it means that clearly private sector has a problem being involved in that area. Or rather, there's a problem for healthcare when you involve the middleman who has to not only survive but maximize profits for its shareholders. So they don't mix private sector and health. They don't mix. The other reason they don't mix is that the private sector wants, again, in search of profits, they will go for the profitable things that involve expensive equipment, high expertise, so dialysis and diagnostics, maybe maternal care, interventional cardiology, all these sophisticated things where they can charge millions, get money from the rich, and make a lot of money. But how does that pay anybody in Abule or in the suburbs of a large city or whatever? So you need, bottom line, private sector can be involved, but they should not be centrally involved. They should be maybe suppliers of certain things, supply drugs, supply consumables, and so on. So I think government has a very big role to play. I think it should be government run, and I think you need to remove the profit motive. So whether we run, I think one idea I had was I think we need more cooperatives in healthcare. It's owned by the patient. Their profit motive is only so that they make more money to reinvest, and that reinvestment is to improve quality and reduce costs for the patients who also be members of the cooperative. So I think we need to explore that in this country. When I was commissioner, my slogan was 3 P's, PPP, prevention, people, and proven interventions. So in other words, all everything we do must be evidence-based, proven intervention. We must focus on people because it's people that run the healthcare, and prevention because it's cheaper than cure. And that would be my mantra if I was in the running healthcare in this country. I would have a massive, I would completely revamp the structure. I would reduce the amount of time it takes to train doctors and nurses and all healthcare professionals, but I would make the training more impactful or more flexible, and you would have different routes to becoming. So you start off by becoming a nurse, and then if you want a little more exams, you would become a doctor. So there will be much more interchangeability between. But the lower cadence will be also much more numerous, and I will make sure that we have enough healthcare professionals and people. What I described before, where you enter a system and then you are trained by those who know better. By having more healthcare professionals and a better structure, I will make sure that you have to have rotations. If those who work in the rural areas or less popular areas, it will be connected to a more central area. So you have to do 6 months here and 6 months there. You must do it. So that means the rural areas are being fed from central, maybe more equipped, more higher quality, but because they're connected, then they benefit from that connection. I would nationalize health insurance, so it was one massive, maybe a few, but I would remove insurance from the private sector because there's nothing wrong with having private sector doing some of the work, but it would have to be run by government, and you would have to be guaranteed your payment. So you want maximizing profits based on at the expense of patients. And then I would focus on the basics. So if you have the money and you want to buy some stupendously expensive intervention, fine. But for the basics, for preventive care, for simple chronic diseases and all those things, and I would put a lot of money into prevention. Our level of healthcare, health literacy in this country is terrible. Healthcare starts with you as an individual. And a lot of people don't even know what causes malaria to this day. They don't know what causes malaria. So we have to educate the people. So the training starts not just with the professionals, but with the individual citizen. So it may not be a comprehensive answer, but
it's interesting you talk about nationalizing health insurance. So some form of socialized medicine. So how do you then resolve that with some of the inefficiencies we are now seeing with schemes like the NHS and even Canada and Indians are complaining, and those are completely publicly owned health insurance schemes. What's your reaction to particularly the problem of overcapacity, which may also be fueling some of these anti-immigrant sentiments because you are qualified for healthcare regardless of your citizenship status or whatever. So the overcapacity question that inevitably catches up with a public scheme.
Well, it would be a hybrid scheme. You try and take the best of the private sector and mix it with you remove the profit incentive. So in other words, let's say you're an existing insurer now. I'll say, look, I will pay you a certain amount of money, you will do certain of the things and you are guaranteed that payment. You doing administering the scheme, okay? And then I look at certain statistics about the performance and how well they are administering the scheme. So it wouldn't be that government would be running it, but you wouldn't have to worry that somehow what hospitals were doing were affecting your profitability, your bottom line. You would have to know that you and all your staff, your salary was guaranteed, and if you work efficiently, you obviously make good money. You make reasonable profits from your company. Now you'll be free to do private with others. It's not that I'm saying you couldn't insure, but I'm saying that for the masses, there has to be something that's going to make a non-profit approach to administering insurance for the masses. You can't have a bureaucrat denying somebody care. At the same time, you have to be careful that. So you'd have to put money into regulation, into part of the cost that they're giving these insurance would be still monitoring on your behalf. But you couldn't make it that. You can't make it to a situation where literally, I mean, again, an example is literally they would just set a target. They would say, you need to make 15% more profit this year. So simple. Not 15% of your cost. How do you do that? You deny more patients care. Simple. And that's how they did it. They just literally, everybody has a target. You are not denying enough people care. But literally, you wouldn't get a bonus with those companies if you were approving too many. That means you're costing the insurance company. So clearly, that's just a major primary disincentive. And it's very complex because even the system I'm describing, there still has to be, for example, performance indicators. If you as a the public system are hiring private people to do some of the work, you must have measures by which you measure their performance. Those measures may be things to do with outcomes, for example. So there will always be some risk somewhere where they're gaming the system. But man, that direct one where simply denying patients care improves your profits, for me that's too direct. They want to cheat the system. Let them try and massage their success statistics and get some performance bonus from the government that they maybe didn't deserve. Let it be a little bit more. It's a difficult area, and honestly, it's going to end up being a very hybrid mix. But right now, we're doing very naively. We're just saying government can't do it all. Private sector, please come in. And that's the worst solution because all you're doing is shifting responsibility and also you're making financial access a big issue. And look, healthcare, I say healthcare is unique. You can't treat it like how you treat other things. If I want to set up any business now, I can probably do it with 1 or 2 staff plus myself. In healthcare, you can't. You're not allowed legally to set up any kind of smallest hospital. You need to have like 5 or 6 staff because you've got to have a doctor, you've got to have a midwife, you've got to have a nurse, you've got to have a Jew, you've got to have security, you've got to have a lab technician, you've got to have a pharmacist. And if you are keeping open 24/7, double the wage bill, yeah? Someone doing the night shift, someone doing the day shift. So how do you set up a small business? And then you're charging people, you're paying all those people have to be there. And then somebody comes in and you're charging them. What are you going to charge them for a consultation? They're seen before they enter when they enter the front door. By the time they leave, they've been seen with maybe 4 or 5 professionals have looked after them. And you want to say that person should just come in and pay 500 naira or 1,500 or something for a consultation? But that is what people can afford. Most Nigerians don't realize that one small illness can just ruin a family's finances. For one small illness with one family member can ruin a family's finances. I'll never forget one day I went to the clinic. I have a clinic. I went to the clinic, dropped in, and I left. There was this man pacing up and down in the waiting room. I went in to see one of the staff. I left and I came back in the afternoon, like 3 hours later. This guy was still there. I met him outside now. He was still on his phone. He was now on his phone making calls and all that. I went in, I saw the duty doctor there. And I said, who's that person? Oh, it's the husband of the woman who's in labor inside. So, what's going on? He said, well, it seems like she maybe she won't need a cesarean. So, then the guy came back in and he walked in. And the doctor called him in. And the guy was saying, so, how's it looking, doctor? Said, it's okay, it's going to be a cesarean. I said, yeah. Doctor, no, now. Can I speak to her? I said, no, you can't speak to her. No, I just want to. The guy wanted to beg her to push that baby out without a cesarean. The reason he'd been on the phone was he was phoning around relatives. Already the bill had exceeded what we charged very, very low. Nevertheless, the bill was 100 and something thousand. He didn't have the money, and he was calling around relatives to see if he could raise the money. Meanwhile, he literally wanted to bully. I mean, I don't mean this negatively, but he was so panicked. He said, "My God, if he goes to cesarean, that bill is going to double." So he wanted to beg the wife, to motivate her to make sure she can do. So, I mean, this is what the ordinary Nigerian goes through. Not to talk of those who come in, they've got a wound, it has to be sutured, but you tell them how much it's going to cost, and then they want to walk out with a gaping wound because they don't have the money. And we go ahead and we treat anyway. Who's going to pay? Or you meet people, you meet a gaggle of patients or relatives out in the courtyard, and you walk in and you say, what's going on out there? They're busy. Some of them want to go and raise the money for their relative who is in. Others want to go in and fight the doctor that the money is too much and all that. Literally, those are the scenes you meet on a daily basis. This is people trying to just look after their health. They are not just smokers they just had bad luck. And I'm not saying smokers don't deserve treatment, but what I mean is that these are innocent people who had bad luck and their life is turned upside down. It's not right. And we have to find ways to get and that doesn't even talk about the thousands of people who are just prisoners in their own house because they have arthritis or cataract. They can't get basic treatment that will mobilize them or enable them to see the people who are taking care of their relatives because there's no welfare state, and they now become impoverished as a result. It's a lot of suffering out there, and it's something that has to be done. I actually see it as an emergency. It's a crisis, but it's because people don't see it. It's a bit hidden, and because of those reasons, I say that people don't really complain where the complaint should go. If you have a disaster, you should be there fighting the local government chairman or commissioner for help, not fighting them, but pressuring them, advocating for change. But people go to just take their loss and pray for better. And they're fatalistic about it. They don't see it as something they need to blame on government. So it's a really complex situation we're in. But all I know is it's an emergency, it's a crisis, and we're busy walking around with it. Oh, we just need to fix it. Oh, we just need to have some. If I was minister, I would ban more foreign travel. Anybody's vehicle. No, it's true. I would say until Nigeria hits what was the target back the health for all by the year 2000? I would say, okay, until we hit that target, not going to any international meeting that's discussing SDGs or any other new targets that the international community has invented. Go and pass that first exam. Then you can be admitted to international fora to discuss new targets. We haven't hit health for all by 2000 and we're still floating around in World Health Assembly and things like that, talking grammar.
A couple of more questions before I let you go. I mean, we talked about healthcare and the relationship with religion and all that. So I just want to look at religion in our society generally. I like to say that Nigeria is an aggressively bi-religious theocracy. Any government office you go, you find people praying every morning, and all protocols observed. Our two national religions have to be represented. We spend public money on religious pilgrimages, but yet somehow we convince ourselves that we have a secular constitution where, freedom of religion is. But within that same federation, we have states who are running their judicial system on religious law. So, given your experience, your personal persuasion, what has your relationship with religion and the Nigerian society been like? Because for skeptics, for doubters, or people who are not even in your face about their beliefs, it can be a very tough society. So what has your own experience been like in that regard?
It's a bit of a love-hate relationship. Personally, I'm not a very religious person, and I find in Nigeria that sometimes that can be an issue, but it's not really a big deal. But where I get frustrated is when I see the harms that it does. But I must say that religion has some significant benefits, and healthcare often taps into those. I'll give you an example. During the polio, the era of polio eradication, when we had that big conspiracy, funny enough, it was a religious dispute that started, that motivated, although it was greed, really, motivated some junior politician to create a lie, to discredit, to cause discontent or disruption. So, and that went out of control, and the success of the polio coverage suddenly dipped as people started rejecting the vaccine. So it took decades to get back to where we were and finally get to eradication. So one of the things that was used positively to reach out to people was a multi-pronged strategy, but they used religion to get into churches and mosques and to co-opt the religious leaders, and then they were able to undo a lot of the damage that had been done, and the rest was history. So that's an example where you need, again, going back to the importance of public health, where you need to reach a lot of people, you need to reach influencers. The religious leaders are the influencers, have always been influencers even before social media, so we need to use them. The problem now comes when you meet those who are of the persuasion, and there are always groups who are more extreme than others. Some groups are very pragmatic, very sensible, and they will take health messages, they will pass them on and all that. But other groups want to make anybody who needs drugs or doctor or the medical system, it's a very insidious, very subtle way that they communicate the fact that the real chosen ones, or the ones who are blessed, get direct intervention from God Almighty. So you are the top. It's like it's a hierarchy. Then if you are not that blessed, or not, you don't have a direct line to the Almighty, then you may have to take drugs or have an operation or use the medical system. So there's that kind of one-upmanship where everybody knows that drugs work or all that, but those who know how to talk to God, they don't even need that. So there's a subtle way of messaging people that it's like a competition. If you can't make up, then you need those other man-made things. But the real holy ones get direct intervention from God, and that's, I'm saying it in a general term, but it's something that's imbibed by people, because you see people, nobody necessarily says don't go to the doctor or don't trust doctors, but you just have somehow absorbed that message. Therefore, there's a reluctance to come to hospital. You rather run to the church and pray or get anointing oil or have a special, and of course the churches, again, money comes into it. So they can charge you for, churches charge for everything. I didn't know this for a long time, but literally everything they do is either it's expected or there's even explicit charge. So if you go there and you have a problem that hasn't resolved, then of course they'll put time aside to come and have a special prayer session on you, anoint you, maybe even do an overnight session with you and all that. So they also have a religious health function where it's all about prayer and religious rituals. That means we are delaying or avoiding conventional treatment. So a lot of the times the religious system works against the health system because they don't quickly push people to the, and also as a religious leader, imagine the kudos you get if you were able to tell you, and of course they're always out there giving testimony, when he laid hands on me, hey, I walked again and all that. Now, I had a friend whose mother died of cancer, and I watched her mother, rather she would, because I always try and give advice, and I would be getting these phone calls. Oh, can you lend me some money? I need to do this. I need to do that. What are you doing? Oh, I have to buy this drug. I have to buy that drug. But in this case, it was my mom is sick. She went to the hospital. Okay. Then she's also gone to the church, and she's told them that she has cancer. Okay. So she's been put in a special healing group. So they want her to pay. Can you lend me some money? Okay. So what are they doing for her? Oh, they're training them because they're going to go and get faith healing. So this is the first time I realized they sell cassettes to them, they sell books to them, and they also train them on how they will behave when they go to the faith healing. Then not all of them go. They will be watching them, and the ones that look cooperative, they will now say, okay, you go on Sunday, and then that's in front of the whole congregation in the massive church, and then they go out, and then there's a laying of hands, and then they're told that they are healed. Now, they never come back and report back to the congregation that this lady I laid my hands on who said, hey, praise the Lord, I'm healed, and left. Of course, the poor lady not only delayed her treatment, and the money I was sending that I thought was for drugs, they were also spending it on buying some of the books and buying the cassettes and or DVDs and paying for the sessions. Then when I told her she was healed, she stopped going to the hospital. She fell sick, went back to the hospital, she died. The whole time she was not getting the treatment she was supposed to be getting in the hospital. Meanwhile, these people are like, that's malpractice as far as I'm concerned. You know somebody has cancer. Even if you want to say, I'm going to help to fight it, at least you say, make sure you don't stop going to the hospital, or what little money you have, make sure you bought your drugs before you start coming to the... No, they didn't care. So that they could sell them everything. And that training was also part of the con, because they would not faith heal those who looked uncooperative or who didn't sound like they bought the whole idea. So in many cases, there's a tension between religion and healthcare, which I think is unhealthy. Bottom line is we could do a lot more to work with the churches and the mosques and actually teach them how they can be of use and what messages they should tell people, and also to tell them to discourage them from doing all those things that actually can actually damage people's health. Or at least tell the truth. Nobody ever went back. I asked the woman's family, I said, did they ever go back to the church and say that she had died? They just keep quiet about the negative testimonies. So it's a mixed bag. Religion can be a force for good in health, and they do say even that the religious, people who have a religion have slightly better health, and these are surveys done in other countries.
Yeah, the evidence is not clear cut.
And it's not like a big thing. I think it's they maybe have a bit more peace of mind than stress or something.
Yeah. So, but I mean, as a, you have no control over what individuals do or what they do not believe in. But as a national culture, do you think that we need to elevate science and critical thinking a little bit? Because that is how countries and cultures progress. I mean, if you look at some of the leaps we've made as a species, maybe something like the Apollo project, for example, where it is actually publicly funded, it is publicly funded science, and the people, regardless of their personal beliefs, Kennedy was a Catholic, right? But he knows there's a bit of a shared consensus that it is not witchcraft that is going to get us to Mars or magic. It is science. So regardless of your personal beliefs, you have enough faith to borrow that in science to elevate it socially, culturally, and educationally, which is something I don't really see in Nigeria. In our schools, even tertiary institutions, you still see a little bit of deference to religion, to where you should really be educating people to think critically and not preach any particular doctrine. So do you think we need to elevate science naturally, publicly?
We do. I think critical thinking is a very, very overlooked skill or habit. And I think even if you remove the word critical, let's say, because people tend to think it's a discipline. No, it, we all think we know how to think. It was only when I got into the academic side of things and read the output of intellectuals and thinkers that I realized, you'll be reading something and I think, but the first part of that reasoning, yeah, I've reasoned it up to here. And then this person has carried on the same train of reasoning and has gone another few miles. And you think, well, why didn't I take the next step in reasoning? Why didn't I take them? And you begin to realize, oh, there's thinkers and thinkers, and there's ways to develop your thinking. Now, of course, we don't all have to become intellectuals, but come on, we need to exercise our brains. Now, the problem with religion and critical thinking is that religion actually just doesn't have a built-in mechanism to make you think. Religion tells you how it is and says your thoughts are secondary. The Holy Book says this, and that's the way it is, or whatever. So, and then of course, there's always that battle between science and religion. Religion people think, they even go as far as calling science a faith. And it's like, well, I don't care what words you play around with. You call science a religion if you have faith in science. Well, fine, but what science tries to do is to say that how do we know things better, and how do we stop human perception getting in the way of understanding the world around us? Call it what you like, but determine certain things that have enabled them to make our life better. So it obviously works. And it doesn't mean that you have to throw your religion aside, but you do have to exercise your brain. Now, in all these kinds of societal arrangements, I was saying earlier that there's a built-in self-perpetuating mechanism in politics. It's the same with religion. They know what is dangerous to the foundations of religion. So it's actually not in the interest of any religion to encourage critical thinking. So they do tend to sort of discourage it. And so while I think the two can work side by side, I think, yes, we have to do far more to elevate science, and we have to do far more to persuade. We will never persuade the gatekeepers. The gatekeepers know what they're doing. But we should be able to persuade the general public that, look, to survive in this day and age, you need to know more, to understand more, and to think more. And the best example I can give is some of the things that circulate on the internet now. And as a doctor who, the little I do on social media, I spend my time trying to counter misinformation. And somebody will send me something like, okay, for an example, one was like, drinking cold water is dangerous. And I'm thinking, if you just exercise your brain a little bit, we are in 2025. People have had fridges since for at least maybe a century. Would they not have discovered something as simple as cold water being dangerous immediately the fridge was, or shortly after the fridge was invented, or possibly even before, because of course there's snow and ice in certain parts of the world. So you don't need to ask me. So what is about? Of course, I answered the question, but inside me, I was thinking, you should be able to work that one out yourself, And that's what I mean by lack of critical thinking. People have assumed that they can't work out all these things, so they don't bother. And then that leaves them open to misinformation. So when COVID came along, again, go and have a salt bath. No, I think that one came out in the Ebola time. Somebody even died. They went and soaked themselves in highly concentrated salt bath or something. I don't know if they drank some of it, but they killed themselves. So the misinformation can be dangerous, but also it should be obvious. When COVID, it was boiled onions and add ginger. And
the American president was telling you to drink bleach.
And you have critical thinking helps you build a good idea of the world around you, and it's a complex world, so you do need to do more of it. I think critical thinking should be taught in schools. Rational thinking, logic should be taught right from primary school.
Yeah,
it helps you equip yourself.
I agree 100% with that. So I mean, interesting conversation. It's a pleasure to.
Thank you. You made my brain.